Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Balance Sheet. I got Raj here with me. This is Billy. Really excited this week. A lot to talk about. Actually, going to probably cut this up into a couple episodes. Um, just a fantastic week in women's wrestling. The type of week that lets you know why we started this podcast. There's just really a lot of good content out there and a lot of women just doing a great job. I think we got to start with NJPW though, because Raj here is fresh off of getting home from Washington, D.C., where he attended Capital Collision to see Mercedes and Momo main event. Raj, how was the show?
Yeah, so thanks, Billy. The show was fantastic in person. I mean, I'm not going to lie and say that I knew what the other matches on the card were. I definitely went for the experience of one. I've always wanted to attend a New Japan event. I grew up watching New Japan. I used to be one of those notorious tape traders with New Japan, All Japan in the 90s. So it was like, hey, I want to do this. I want to see it. Number two, I want to see, Mercedes main event against Momo, which I knew on paper was going to be a fantastic match. And, you know, experiencing that match live, we were about four rows back of commentary, dead center. You probably definitely saw me on TV a bunch. Um, I met some tremendous fans at the event who loved what we're doing with the podcast, loved the idea of it, loved that we're trying to be positive. So I got the canvas, talked to a lot of folks, but being in the building live, there's something to be said about the smaller crowd that's hot and loud and the acoustics are better. And it was that. I mean, when I will say this, the match before Mercedes and Momo, which was Leo Rush. Leo Rush is from the DMV area. He's from DC, Maryland, Virginia. So the crowd was super hot into him. I think he was fighting somebody called Gabe Kidd, and the crowd was ultra hot for that match as well. And I was like, okay, are they going to be up for Mercedes? But they certainly were. She was probably 90% of the crowd was there for her. They were in favor of her. Towards the end of the match, though, there was a lot of dueling Momo CEO chants, which was great. But to watch them work in person that close from me, you don't realize how hard the women of New Japan hit and kick and punch until you see it up close. Like I have I think it's great that we have multiple different women's wrestling companies that are hot. You have Stardom, you have TNA, you have AEW, you have WWE, and they all have different styles. But man, seeing Momo kick her up close and personal, I mean, she really kicked her. Like you could see sweat flying off of Mercedes. That's how hard she kicked her up close and personal. And Momo was a tremendous heel in the match. She, did the CEO dance. She mocked her. Mercedes came out, tremendous entrance, Apollo Creed gear, Washington, D.C. It was symbolic. The thing that I say to folks is that whether you are coming down the ramp at WrestleMania with 65, 70,000 people, or you coming down with 3,000, do you emulate star power? And the one thing about Mercedes, I'm not talking anything about in the ring. I'm talking about before she even gets to the ring. She is a star. Like she looks like a star. She carries herself like a star. She acts
Oh
the
yeah.
part. She dresses the part. And when she walked out, it's like, man, you could tell she's a cut above everybody else on the card in terms of star power. Like she has that aura to her. And so I thoroughly, for $70, which is exactly what I paid for the ticket, that's the face value. That was the Ticketmaster price. It was probably one of the better wrestling experiences I've had because I've gone to house shows where I live in El Paso that cost me more than $70. And I got to
Yeah.
see a TV event, ringside, got to see, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time in person. She was great. I photobombed her. That's awesome. Um, she was taking pictures with everybody at ringside, and I decided to just get in there and get my selfie with her. And she was gracious enough to take pictures with everybody. But yeah, great experience. I'm very disappointed that the show actually started right on time. And because of DC traffic, we did not get there to see the pre-show match because there was a women's match on the pre-show with Trish Adora, and there were three other ladies, and I really wanted to see that match, but I didn't. Also, I want to apologize. I tweeted that I would give away the limited edition debut Boston T-shirt, and Mike, who's been on this podcast before, had the shirt in his hand and left it in the Uber. So, to the Uber driver in DC who got that T-shirt, congratulations. You got us to the event. So I guess that is your tip. But yeah, that's what happened. So yeah, great experience. I highly recommend if New Japan comes to your town or you can make the trip and there's like a couple of matches on there you want to see, go see it because again, we've been talking about this, Tony Khan, instead of booking 15,000 seat arenas where 3,000 people show up, book the 3,000, 4,000 seat arenas in that city and get that intimate sellout crowd experience. There was 2,400 people in the building, felt like there was 12,000 people in the building. It was really good experience.
That's awesome. No, I definitely had serious FOMO. I think it was match 2 or 3, where I saw you and Mike behind Walker and Veda there. So I was like, and knowing the ticket price, but that's definitely a goal of mine. Maybe that Lowell show that I want to get to, and a big part of it because New Japan, is not afraid to put Mercedes in the main event. I'll talk about it from the viewer perspective. If New Japan could just get those acoustics right for the at-home viewer, I think they still struggle with that a little bit. For anyone who watched the show live, the audio for the crowd was a little bit off. If you rewatch it, which I've done twice, seems like they've mixed the audio better. So it's a better viewing experience on the rewatch. The match itself, that's a love of the game match, man. This is why we love Mercedes. To your point, she's in there with a woman that, is well known throughout Stardom and New Japan circles, well known for being a hard hitter, physical striker. This is not someone who's going to, put Mercedes on it's not someone she'd be able to do a Wembley show with or something like that. Just from name value, not talent or anything like that. But she's in there, again, love of the game, adding to her legacy in very unique ways, right? She wants these awesome, hard-hitting matches, main eventing a New Japan show. I thought the match delivered as well as you can possibly deliver a match. I mean, I want everyone to think about this. They may have met when Mercedes was in Japan. They may have met backstage. I don't know if they've met or not. But they never met under the circumstances of we're going to be wrestling, right? So maybe they get to the arena that day, early in the day, and maybe they talk. There's a language barrier there. But it's not just, a lot of women wrestle women for the first time in front of a crowd. But having to do that in the main event of a show that 90% of the crowd bought tickets to see you deliver a match worthy of not only worthy of a main event, I think it was the top 5 women's match of the year. I'm not going to split hairs on where it is in that, but it was a fantastic match. I would put it just behind the Willow match as far as Mercedes is concerned for this year. And that's really only because Willow and Mercedes had a story. In ring, it was as good as that match, just not with a story coming in. But they didn't promo together. They didn't build the match in any way, shape, or form that involved being together, and delivered a sensational match that had great storytelling. And by the end of it, you felt like they had been feuding for a long time. You felt like Momo had been trying to beat Mercedes for a long time. You felt like Mercedes was fighting off this group for a long time. So I was really, really happy with it. Um, Wish I was there in person, but enjoyable experience from home as well. Commentary was really good. I think that's the first time I've heard Walker Stewart. Um, he's really good. I think someone said 21. I haven't confirmed that, but young guy, and real smooth on the mic. So good show all around. The tag match beforehand was pretty good, with Mina and Trish Adora. But it was a good card. I thought the Ali match was pretty good. And some other good stuff on there. But we're there for the women, and again, props to Rocky for putting Mercedes in the main event. I think that's the real thing that I'll continue to support New Japan America, treating her like the star she is.
We're gonna get a cameo on this podcast because my dog Oreo is right here and he is barking like a mad person. And so we're gonna get him and we're gonna bring him on camera because he loves the camera. Come here, Oreo. All right.
Hey,
Here is Oreo. Say hi. Hi, Oreo. So because you have been so bad, you're gonna spend the podcast with me, which I can multitask. Say hi. Okay. So let me ask you a question from the television experience because I got to watch the match, but somebody sent me like a YouTube link, and it was the commentary was fine and everything like that. Did you like how they lit the match on TV where it was dark?
um, I don't mind it in a small show like that. I don't like. I'm biased. I don't like the New Japan rings, the corners, especially after what happened to Mercedes last year. So I guess the lighting doesn't distract me as much as the corners and turnbuckles do. But no, I don't mind it. My thing is, there's clearly sound issues, um, in the way that they have the crowd mic'd, that they have the ring mic'd, and then commentary, and it's just not the mix you're used to if you watch as much wrestling as we do, where you can hear the impact moves. Um, Part of me when I first watched it, I said maybe the crowd's not as into it as I think, and then I rewatched it, and the crowd in was insanely into the match. Um, you could not hear that on the live pay per view, or at least I didn't feel like the crowd was as into the match as I did upon rewatch. So it feels like they remixed it because obviously they have the audio. It's just about getting the balance right.
That's a good point. And I wonder how much of what we think is over on TV is due to like in WWE, they have A plus sound. They have A
Right.
plus microphones. They light things correctly. They know how to. They're a TV show that's a wrestling, that's wrestling,
100%.
right? Like everything
Yeah.
they do is for television. And I'm in this New Japan audience, and the crowd is bonkers for this match. I mean, they are rabid. I mean, there's a lot of Momo fans in that crowd, but there's a huge Mercedes fan base who kind of follows her. Like I met folks who, Mike, he was in Boston for her debut, and I think I
Yep.
met maybe 15, 20 people in the food area. We were just talking about wrestling, women's wrestling, the podcast, and they all were there with him, and they recognized him from that event. So these are individuals who do follow her. Like they're going to All Out in Chicago, and on TV. To your point, it didn't feel like the match was as loud as when I was in the building. And I do wonder about that with the sound, with the production value. Sometimes do we rate matches lower because on TV it doesn't feel like it's as over, but then when you're in the building, it really is. Like, you look at, I guess, from women's wrestling, we look at Sasha Bailey Brooklyn on TV. in the crowd. Nobody has ever said, oh, well, TV didn't do that match justice, or
Right.
you got to be there. And I know people who were there in person who went to Brooklyn. Shout out to Matt McCool in Philadelphia. And he told me the story that he was in the crowd. They watched that match, and the match took so much out of them. They all walked up to the concourse to talk about how good it was, and they missed Kevin Owens' Balor. Like, they didn't even watch Kevin Owens' Balor because they couldn't focus on it. They were like, what did we just watch? And that's what I felt like watching that match on TV. I don't know if this match came across like that on TV, but I could tell you this, being there in person, other than seeing Sasha Charlotte in LA, where Sasha won the world title, the women's title, the Raw title, the second time, the main event of Raw in October 2016, this was my favorite in-person Mercedes Moné / Sasha Banks match, and I have seen her 12 times. And honestly, from an in-ring standpoint, this match was every bit the match that her match with Charlotte was. It's just the match with Charlotte was in Staples Center. There's 12,000 people. Oscar De La Hoya is diagonal from me. Other celebrities are sitting on this side. There's big production value, but man, it was a tremendous experience. And for the price point, you really can't beat it. I mean, tell me what you can do in today's world of sports, entertainment, theater for $70. You could make a case that's as cheap as going to the movies. Like, once you get your tickets, your popcorn, you pay for babysitting, if you have kids, that's the same price. I mean, I don't know how much everybody paid at home. I know some people paid $20 for this show. Some people paid more. But man, $70 to see that match in person, amazing, amazing, amazing experience. And I gotta say, man, kudos to Mercedes, because not everybody can, like you talked about, for love of the game, and where that phrase comes from those who don't know. So I have a WNBA hoodie on, but that phrase actually comes from Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan famously, in his contract, the only player ever to get this, had a for the love of the game clause where he could play any pickup game anytime he wanted without consequence of losing his contract, losing his salary, because he has the love of basketball. So he could go anywhere and just hoop. Look at Mercedes in that same vein. And I'll tell you a quick story. So I have the selfie with her, and I might post it later, I might not. So I sent it to a bunch of folks, girlfriend,
me included,
you included, ex-wife. Now, my ex-wife has been to many of the Sasha Banks Mercedes Moné matches with me. So I sent it to her, and first question was, who's the kid you adopted to get this selfie? Because there's a kid in between me and Mercedes, so you'll see it. But, I sent her some videos, and she said, hey, what do you think she feels like, where she went from being 80,000 people? Because we went to WrestleMania 32 together, where, she faced Charlotte and Becky. And I mean, that was a lot of people in that building. And she's like, how do you think she feels that she went from 60, 70,000 to now, 2,500? And I said, I think she makes all the money she wants to make. She gets the schedule she wants. She gets the travel she wants. I think she just loves to wrestle. So I think Mercedes is one of those individuals who brings her wrestling boots and her gear with her everywhere. And if she was in a crowd and she saw the promoter of an indie show and they said, hey, we're kind of running, we're kind of running behind, or one of the women didn't show up, do you want to go wrestle? I feel like she's one of those individuals who pull the boots and the gear out of her bag and wrestle, like in a 500-seat arena. Like, I feel like that's who she is, because she just loves it so much. And there are other competitors who probably wouldn't make that adjustment and wouldn't want to make that adjustment. And they don't have to. If you can stay in the WWE, as I call it, vortex, your whole career, make a lot of money, play in front of big theater, you're playing on Broadway every night, as they say, so be it. But I think she's one of those individuals who loves it so much, she'll go off Broadway just to get reps in. That's who she is. And that's what I saw, because she gave every bit as effort in that match as she did at WrestleMania main event Bianca Belair or Hell in a Cell Becky or Hell in a Cell Bailey where there was no crowd. I mean,
Yep.
she's just an A-plus competitor, and it was tremendous to see her. And I love watching her wrestle the Joshi style. I think I would love to see more of it. I would love to see more New Japan stuff out of her. I want to see her in Stardom. I think that brings out a different side of her that was tremendous.
No, I completely agree. The funny thing about Mercedes is the layers there, and those of us who are fans of her, who kind of watch the whole thing, um, and are close enough to kind of see who she really is. Like you said, there's people who follow her all over and see as many of her shows as possible. Uh, that's the funny thing about the gimmick. The funniest thing about the gimmick is, she's rich, you better pay me, all that stuff. But the reality is, she just gets paid that way because she happens to be one of the greatest of all time. But she'd still be wrestling if she wasn't one of the greatest of all time. To your point, she loves to do this. It's what makes her great. Um, and the money has come because of how much she loves it and how great she is. So it's like this chicken and the egg thing. But yeah, I mean, uh, she could have gotten that AEW contract and rested on her laurels for the rest of her career, had TV matches that were good, did well, whatever, won some titles, do a WWE comeback in the future if she decides that's what she wants to do. She doesn't have to do a Momo NJPW match, but she wants to. She wants to because she wants to test herself. She wants to because she knows that she's maybe the only woman capable of getting the main event of that show. Um, and she wants to break down that door for the next, woman to come behind her because for that crowd, you can't just put a woman in the main event based on name value. NJPW crowd, you have to deliver the match. You cannot have, you know, a ho hum match in that main event. You just can't. Um, the men, there are 9 matches on the main card. She was the ninth match. Men throughout all the stops in pretty much every match. I mean, Leo bled. Uh, Gabe had to basically bury him into the mat to get him pinned in his hometown. Um, there was blood in several matches. I mean, you have to deliver, and no one delivers like Mercedes. And I think um, that's why she challenges herself to do it and says, "Well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? So I'm going to do it." And I love that about her. It's one of my favorite things about her. Um, and I last thing on it, the crowd thing. Again, watching that on TV, her go around. I think that's she loves that. I think that's who she is. Um, I responded to a tweet. Some people prefer her as a heel. Um, I like her as the take no shit baby face who's tough as nails, and who she is in New Japan, I think is her best version of herself. I think it's the closest version to who she actually is too. Maybe that's why I like it. But exactly how she wrestles in New Japan is my personal favorite version of Mercedes.
So you like her as a in-ring babyface in New Japan, but you like kind of her heel character with promos, backstage vignettes,
Exactly,
mannerisms.
exactly what she did in New Japan. She came in like a star. She makes no apologies about being the biggest star on the show. She put the belt right in Momo's face pre-match.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha.
So not I've wanted this since I was 10 years old. I'm just happy. I'm happy to be here and be champion Mercedes. Not WWE pink hair, though. I love that.
Okay.
I love that era, the pink hair era. I love it. I'm not saying I don't, but the best version of her to me is borderline baby face. But by the time she's in a full blown fight, that baby face aura comes out, that comeback ability, and the way she wrestles as a baby face. Um, the the match where Bayley turned on her against Shayna and Nia. She went into that match as one of the biggest heels on the roster, and by the end of it, she was a babyface. And that was the way she wrestles when she's getting manhandled, basically. Um, that's just my favorite version of her matches. And so I think she's honed that character enough that she can kind of be a little bit of an asshole coming into a match. She can promo heel, she can promo disrespectfully, but at the end of the day, the crowd loves her, and she can turn that on when the crowd's behind her in a match. Once it reaches that level of physicality, she's the babyface. So they're not going to book her like that in AEW because they've got to keep it coherent week to week on TV. That's what I really enjoy about these New Japan matches.
Yeah, I want to shout out Keyshawn and Nick. I had a long, lengthy conversation with them at the show. For those who have seen the TV copy of the match, Keyshawn he was the gentleman in the front row with the green Boston t-shirt on, and he was doing the CEO dance, and you could see him right there in the front. And poor guy. I mean, he has seen a lot of Mercedes matches in person, and he does not have the record I have. We were talking about this. I have seen her wrestle 12 times. She's only lost one match when I have seen her, which is to Ronda Rousey at the Rumble. He, on the other hand, saw a lot of her 2017 run in person.
Ooh.
Royal Rumble, Asuka match, Survivor Series in Houston, where she got pinned by Nia. I mean, he has seen her lose a lot in person, and we were just talking about how she's one of the rare cases of talent where you can't say the WWE didn't push her. You cannot say that about a WrestleMania main eventer, first ever pay-per-view main event, most television main events for a woman until she left the company, 7-time champion, multiple shows where she had multiple segments. Like, you can't say that. But that 2017 to when she came back with the blue hair era, they left a lot of, pun intended here, money on the table.
Oh,
because
God.
like we were talking with that, and Keyshawn and Nick definitely want to come on this podcast at some point. They have great perspective on women's wrestling. They know the genre very well. And we were talking about that. Like, my goodness, like, as much as she accomplished in WWE, and she accomplished a lot, those 2 years looking back, they left a lot to be desired. Because
Unreal. Yeah.
if you go back and look at what women's stories and characters were hot in that 2 years, other than Becky getting as hot as she did, and that was later towards the end of the 2018 year, the women's division wasn't necessarily hot. It was good and had a lot of talent, but it was basically on Raw, it was the Alexa Bliss show, and on SmackDown, it was the Charlotte Flair show.
Well,
And to think that we never got, and we, again, me and these two gentlemen, we talked about it. If somebody had told me in 2016 that after their Roadblock match, this would be the last time we ever saw Charlotte versus Sasha Banks on a WWE Premium Live event, after the whole year was built around them on Premium Live events, SummerSlam, Hell in a Cell, WrestleMania, Battleground. They were, by the way, they were at Battleground. Both of those gentlemen, where Bayley made her debut, because it was in Washington and they're from that area. I would have laughed. I would have said, there is no way you're telling me these two, who the WWE built this division around for 2 years, will never touch again on a big match stage. And they haven't.
it's crazy.
And that's really, really, some ways sad.
Yeah. No,
It's sad.
it's my number one regret on her being gone from WWE is actually the Charlotte match. I was so ready for it. They made us wait so long. And it hasn't happened since 2016. And I'm, I'm not in the business of guessing whether or not we're ever going to get that match because I think Mercedes should do whatever she's happy with, um, and not worry about anyone else's timeline or where they're at. And she's having the time of her life right now. But that is a major drop ball from WWE. Uh, and all I'll say about 2017, I'm going to take my Sasha Banks fan hat off. In 2016, women main evented, and you could argue women should have main evented WrestleMania. That Charlotte Becky Sasha match could have main evented WrestleMania. It was certainly bigger than the Roman Triple H match, as far as fan investment goes. Um, Looking back, I get Roman Reigns Triple H. Of course, it was going to main event. I'm just saying, in the moment, you could have started a hashtag and no one would have laughed at you. 2017, not anything that they did was going to main event in 2017. So looking back on it, take Sasha Banks off the plate. They didn't book the division well because in 2016 we had main events or close to main event angles, and in 2017 there was nothing that anyone watching would have said this should main event. So Becky's really what got them back on track as far as possibly main eventing stuff. I guess Asuka Charlotte, was in the realm of main event. Obviously wasn't going to main event over Roman again, but 2017 is a lost year for sure. Okay, you talked about who you'd like to see Mercedes wrestle. Well, we already know who her next opponent is. Pretty good little four-way match on Collision on Saturday with Queen Aminata, Serena Deeb, Thunder Rosa, and Sheeta, with Sheeta coming out on top. And so now we are going to get Mercedes versus Sheeta coming up at All Out. What do you think about that match? We've seen it. We've got an appetizer version of the match.
I mean, the match will be tremendous. They're going to get
Yep.
time. It's going to be on a pay-per-view. I think they're telling a story with Sheeta that, she's spiraling. Feels like she's going to turn heel soon. She's going to snap and, just kind of go into a different version of her character. But the match that we got on TV a couple of weeks ago, I thoroughly wanted more of it. I felt like they left 5 to 7 minutes on the table. Um, Obviously, you had the Camille factor as outside interference to protect Sheeta. I thought it was a great match on TV. I think it'll be a better match in Chicago with a hotter crowd, and depending on where they place it. And Sheeta being an original of AEW and is super over with the crowd. We were in Nashville together when that was Britt's first match back, and Sheeta was 50% of the crowd. I mean,
For
50%
sure.
of the crowd is cheering for Sheeta. So I think this match will have everything we want out of a Mercedes match. I think it'll be hard hitting. I think the wrestling will be crisp. Look, if you're going to tell me I'm getting Mercedes Moné versus Hikaru Shida, I'm not going to complain about it and say, "Oh, I just saw it 2 weeks ago. I've seen that online." Like, well, we just saw the match. So what?
Yeah.
If I got to see, I as a kid went to see Randy Savage. Well, I didn't go for that match, but it was the main event was Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat. It was 1 month exactly before their famous WrestleMania match. Savage won the match, and he won with the same way Steamboat won the match. He won with a small package, but he held his tights. But Steamboat actually bled in that match because Savage hit him with the ring bell and he cut him open. And the match, that I saw was tremendous. But seeing it a month later, I wasn't like, "Oh, I just saw this match. I'm bored." Like, if it's a good match, it's a good match. We
Yeah.
saw Charlotte and Sasha. We just talked about it wrestle every month for a year, and it was good. So yeah, no, I'm excited for this match, and I think again, we talked about this before we started recording. We have not covered All In, and I know we definitely need to talk about Tony and Mariah. But before we get to
Yep.
there, Mercedes did have a match on that show with Britt Baker. Um, Rather than adding to what seems like a growing sentiment that match did not live up to expectations and did not deliver, because there's so much content about that. I would just say this, but we don't need to spend time on that match. You're probably going to look back on Mercedes's career and say that was one of her three matches she'd probably want back in her career. Where if she could go back and redo it, she probably would pick that one, maybe the Charlotte Hell in a Cell match, because I thought the match had a good story to it. Like when I watched it back multiple times, I just don't know if all the execution was there. And there could be multiple factors. I mean, you have a person returning in Brit who had a stroke or a seizure, sorry, and also had other sickness. So I don't know if she's in ring shape. She looks phenomenal, but I don't know if she's in cardio shape. I was watching a movie on the plane called Anyone But You, and I think in the movie there's a scene where he's trying to swim and keep up with Sydney Sweeney, but he couldn't. And she's like, "Oh, you're hot girl fit. Like you look fit, but you have no cardio." That's what I felt like when I watched that match. That there was something, Britt just doesn't have her in-ring conditioning back. So rather than spend time on it, we could move on. But you notice AEW also did not talk about that match at all.
They didn't. I do want to say one thing on it. It kind of aligns with what you're saying. I don't know the why, but as I watched the match, I realized that Mercedes and Britt took significantly more risks, moves that were intended to shock and awe than I would have guessed going into the match. And Mercedes on her Monet Mag, sign up if you haven't. You get to hear directly from Mercedes in ways that fans of hers for 10 plus years, I mean, she's really let everyone inside on that weekly magazine that she sends out. She said there's a couple spots that she didn't feel like that match needed, but they did them anyway. And I don't know why that is. I will say my guess is that they felt like they had to try to do more because the build wasn't quite there, the spot they were on the card. It seems like Mercedes and Britt, instead of being able to tell a story for whatever reason in the ring that would have riled the crowd up, they tried spots more than story, more than Mercedes ever does. I've watched her career for a decade, right? She's got great spots, but it's never about the spots. It's about the story. And I mean, they did the top rope body slam. They did the body slam reversal, Spanish fly deal. That was extreme. I mean, I've never seen Mercedes do anything like that from the top rope. High risk. Mercedes had the spot where she kind of showed Charlotte how to do that
Mm-hmm.
backbreaker turnbuckle move from SummerSlam. I mean, they didn't leave. They didn't ho hum a match out there. They didn't go out there and not try anything. They tried a lot. It just didn't work with the. It just didn't work. I don't know why it didn't work fully. There was spot on the card. Britt's suspension didn't help as far as with her being as over as she needed to be for the match to work. The glove bit doesn't work in a match like that after you get your tail kicked in for 10 minutes and then you finally get a head on the heel and you spend a minute doing the glove deal. It just, some of that didn't work, but yeah, they moved on quickly. AEW didn't even mention it last week, but they did a recap on Mercedes Momo match.
And for anybody who listened to this podcast last week, I hope you took my co-host's here advice and bet that way, because he actually nailed the finish perfectly. He said Camille's going to get kicked out and Mercedes is still going to win clean, which is exactly what happened.
Yep.
And it was the shock to a lot of people that they would book a match with, especially with Britt Baker, that way. I will say this about that specific match. I appreciated Mercedes trying new things. She's trying the power stuff. We've never seen her do it before. I hope down the road she does that stuff. Like maybe when she wrestles Riho, that would be
Oh,
stuff she could do with Riho because, of the size. I thought that a couple of the spots were tremendous in that match. The body slam reversal, the avalanche slam reversal, a huge Manami Toyota homage there. And then, the stomp into the power bomb spot was great. Like I thought those two spots were
Yeah.
tremendous. I think that following Will Ospreay in England is the death spot for most anybody on that match. And
Yep.
here's why. The next match after Mercedes and Britt was Darby Allin versus Jack Perry. Coffin match. The crowd was dead for that match too, right? Like they weren't
Yep.
super invested into that match the way I thought they would be, especially when Sting came back at the end, then they woke up. But like, I think Ospreay in England is just a tough act to follow. And Ospreay, if you love his matches, his style, you love him because he never disappoints that style. Like he's as good as there is working that style. It's hard. And
Yeah.
I think it shows a lot of confidence in Mercedes and Britt that they thought high enough of them that, hey, you could follow Will Ospreay. But I think it was just a bad idea. Like to me, what follows Will Ospreay in England would have been maybe Swerve and Bryan, and that's it. Like they should have been co-main.
Or a very, to me, if I'm building that card, I put one of the multi-men gimmicky, whether it was the multi-tag deal or the ladder deal, because you've got some artificial stuff in there that can pull the crowd back into it. They're always going to react to a ladder spot. But let's talk about the match on that card that really delivered. Mariah versus Tony. I think everyone knew Mariah was going to win. You don't want wrestling to be predictable, but when wrestling's at its best, it tells these stories that there's only one way to make it right and only one way to continue, or as Cody would say, finish the story. And Mariah winning was exactly what needed to happen. But I thought it was a great match. Again, not splitting hairs, but between Mercedes and Momo, Mariah, Tony, and then we'll talk about later the NXT card from last night. I think we got three of the 6 or 7 best women's matches of the year in the last week plus. So been a hell of a ride. But Tony and Mariah, the story was great. I thought that they built the match really, really well in ring. I was shocked when Mariah slapped the taste out of her mom's mouth. And if you haven't seen it, she 100% said, "Mom, I'm really going to hit you because that's the only way this is going to work." And she slapped the crap out of her mom. I mean, bravo to Mariah's mom for saying, "Hey, you know what? This is cinema. Let's make this work." I I think my mouth hit the floor, but I loved I loved that match. I thought Tony did an amazing job of not being too dramatic, but it's clear, Mariah had the upper hand because she's moved on in the relationship. Tony was a means to an end for her, and Tony's still hurt. She hasn't moved on, and so that held her back from winning in that match. So I thought it was a really, really good match.
Tremendous match, tremendous story. Thought at the end where Tony wanted to hit her with the shoe, but couldn't bring herself to doing it. That's what cost her the win. She still has love for Mariah. She has affection for her. She doesn't realize that, Mariah has used her for a whole year to set up to this point. She still, in that sense, thought the relationship was timeless. But, hey, Tony Storm, I'm not talking about in ring, I'm talking about character wise. Legitimately, she's been the best women's character for the last year. She has. I mean, for what she has built up to, the vignettes, how she cuts a promo, how she, the dialect she uses, how she does press conferences with Tony. She comes up with the scripted paper. She has played that gimmick to a T. and she has been tremendous in it, and she deserves all her flowers because it isn't that long ago where she just walked out on the WWE as well, like just left, just said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I want to retire, possibly, and just didn't show up to a house show and left. And for her to come this far, kudos to her. She's really turned her career around, and kudos to AEW for giving her that platform with the character. But I think she's been the best women's character over the last year. She's been phenomenal. And Mariah May,
Yeah.
to her credit, has been phenomenal too. I mean, I'm pretty sure when they signed Mariah May, this was the story they gave her. Hey, you're going to win the world title in your home country, but this is how we're going to get there. And the crowd was so hot for that match. And look, I feel like that match should have maybe been the one to follow Ospreay. It probably could have. It probably could have. The crowd was into it. They delivered in the ring, and the story was there. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think that was one of the best women's wrestling matches we've seen this year. This is going to be a very tough category to have your favorite five because we're only in September.
Yep.
And I could make a case for 10 matches being in five. There are that many quality women's matches. Roxanne herself, and we'll get to Roxanne, in part 2, might have her own top 10 because somebody posted all of her matches this year, and I was like, wow, every one of these matches is good.
Crazy run.
Chelsea, Thea, last night with Jada, Lyra Valkyrie, and Paisley. I mean, she's had so many great matches that Roxanne herself could have her top 5. So it's been a great year for women's wrestling. And for fans of the genre, like obviously we are, this is what we've always wanted out of the genre, which is
100%.
You can go to multiple companies, you get quality product, and look, just like the hoodie I'm wearing, where you see the women's version of the sport slowly getting acclaim, and it's challenging the men in some areas like the WNBA is. I think women's wrestling is, to a lot of people, the reason they love wrestling. I mean, they are exclusively women's wrestling fans, and nothing against the men. The men have had 100 years at this, but the women are coming. And I could make a case that they're equal to, if not in many cases above, what the men are putting out there in these multiple companies. I mean, we have not even talked about TNA, right? And what they're doing with the women.
Yeah, no, I think the women continue to have the leg up on storytelling, especially in ring, on some of the bigger programs. Mariah, I want to talk about Mariah May for a second. I want to give Mariah her flowers. Yeah, she was pitched winning in Wembley when she signed, but she delivered. She delivered in a way that the crowd wanted it. You could be promised a lot of things at the beginning of a contract, but if you're not delivering in wrestling, we know, and Tony would be an idiot if he was immune to it, that sometimes plans change, right? They shouldn't change for no reason, but you also have to put out the best product, and she delivered in every way. And I want to give Tony credit. I mean, we are being beat over the head with, WWE signed Julia, WWE signed Stephanie Vacour, Delta, they're winning the arms race, da 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 da. Two things. Tony went out and he signed the greatest North American women's wrestler of all time, a name, and he went out and he signed Mariah May over the last year. And Mariah is exactly in that Julia Stephanie category. You can make a pretty good argument that exposure wise, she's got a deeper history than Stephanie does. Stephanie's kind of the last year had gotten big. Mariah has been paying her dues in Japan for a little while now, had been paying her dues for a little while now. And Tony recognizing that this was a hot free agent that he could sign and build, help her be the platform that she could build into a star on. She was going to be a star anyway. She's that good. I want to give Tony credit because everyone's acting like WWE won every single free agent battle on this women's side, and they won a couple of the recent ones, but Mariah is going to be a gigantic star. And I would also argue that the path to Mariah being a star has already happened and is much more clear than the path to Julia and Stephanie being a star in WWE, because I don't know if Triple H is sitting around thinking about where they fit at the top of the main roster card for him, right? Is he going to have Stephanie or Julia beat a Bianca Belair, or a Rhea or a Liv? I don't know. It could be yes. He could see them as top of the card stars. I'm just giving Tony credit for Mariah, within a year of being signed, had the best storyline in the company with Tony, and a great crowning moment in Wembley. And I am so big on long title reigns finishing with the right loss to propel the next person forward, right? So Bayley getting the belt at Brooklyn, Sasha getting the belt at Hell in the Cell. Like, ending the story is what makes a championship run great. You could have a 3-year run that seems great, and if you drop the belt in a way that doesn't matter, it diminishes everything you did with that title. So props to Tony finishing her championship story, and then props to Tony for going all in on Mariah and being right.
She's a tremendous talent, and you're
Yep.
right. Like, she, the interesting point you brought up about Tony brought her in and had her slotted in right away into a top spot, top story, pushed her into it. She became the world champion. Again, we'll talk about Julia's debut last night. It was tremendous, but I
Electric.
understand. I mean,
Yep.
there's the depth that they have at WWE could seem to be a detriment at times because they have an embarrassment of riches on both rosters, the NXT roster and on the main roster. And yeah, when I look at the main roster, I ask myself, Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley. I don't know if anybody else in Triple H's eyes is above them on the pecking order. Because even when Bianca loses, which is rare, she's very protected. And when Rhea loses, she's very protected. So I don't see those two ever being surpassed. I could see women being brought up to their level, but I don't see two women surpassing those two women for the foreseeable future because they are homegrown. They have invested so much in them. And both of them just have this aura and magnetism about them that speak to what, like, when I look at Triple H wrestlers, both of them check every box. They're
Yep.
tall, they have the body definition, they're athletic, but they like are ass kickers, like both of them. And Triple H seems to really love that. And yeah, I mean, it's a great talking point about Mariah because she has been as great a free agent signing as any of the companies have had over the last year. I mean, yeah,
That's
obviously
what I'm saying.
Mercedes, yeah, obviously Mercedes is up there, and obviously, you look at the Julias, you look at the Stephanies, you look at the Deltas, you look at, I mean, you could make a case. I mean, he's the champion of NXT now, Ethan Page. You look at Nia Jax being brought back. There's a lot of talent that's come back, that's been re-signed or brought in that have done well. But yeah, Mariah is as effective as in what she does as anybody because she had to play the sidekick for a whole year and she did a tremendous job. But when she turned, it was one of the great dark turns of all time. I
Yep.
mean, she went bonkers. She beat up Tony, she beat up the guy, the sommelier, the butler guy. I don't know what his name is, and she did awesome work, man, and she deserves all the praise and love. And I'm glad to see that she's starting to get some title defenses. She fights Nyla Rose this week on Dynamite, and I'm looking forward to that match because what I like about Mariah is I like how she wrestles in the ring too. I know she's not that
Fantastic.
experienced,
She's good.
but for what she has done so far, man, she's on the fast track to having one of the all-time careers if she keeps up the pace. She's a great character and she's great in the ring. So yeah, um,
When
that was yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, when we saw her live, I think I turned to you and I said, after she did that sellout drop kick, how violent it was. And I turned to you and I said, if this is how she's going to wrestle, it's always going to work because she's got everything going outside the ring, but she wrestles very physically inside the ring. And the character that she's built, it's always going to play. Um, you know, I think she's got some really great ability and being over in Japan, some of the technical stuff is very smooth and all that. But at the end of the day, when you're this vicious heel, um, some of those high impact moves and just the way that she beats people up, I just think it works really, really well for the character she's trying to build. And it works very well for the AEW brand as well. So um, I think uh, it'll be interesting to see what her first real story is with someone beyond Tony and kind of what notes they can hit on that. So I'm excited to see where she grows and where she goes. So
Ooh, yeah, that's an interesting who her first opponent would be because I mean the baby
like
faces
feud,
on the
yeah,
AEW roster. Yeah, the baby faces on because she's clearly a heel. The baby faces on the roster are not that much. I mean, there's Willow, maybe. Willow beats Stat. Maybe that's the next feud. Mariah
maybe.
May Willow. Maybe they bring in somebody from ROH. Maybe they go. I don't think you do Hater and Mariah right away. I don't think you could
No,
do Hater and Mariah right away. I think you gotta save hate for down the road. But
that
look,
might be who she drops the belt to. Truthfully,
yeah, yeah, I could see that more than I can see her having a feud with Hater and winning. Because Hater, I mean, she was she was as over as anybody when she came out, and she looked tremendous, and she got a huge reaction, and she's a star. She's a star as well, and obviously she's been gone for a while, but she is somebody who you can hitch a rocket to and could take you to the top. So yeah, AEW New Japan, Stardom, great week for the non WWE promotions when it comes to women's wrestling. Thoroughly
100%.
enjoyed my New Japan experience, and I would highly recommend anybody out there if you can go see a New Japan show, go do it. You get your money's worth. I mean, you get hard hitting, you get an intimate experience, and you get to see a different style of wrestling that you do not see on American TV. WWE works a style, no denying it, and they're very good at it, and they have a lot of success with it. But sometimes you want different seasoning to your meals, and that's what I liked about this week. Going to see New Japan, it was a great experience. So I
Good.
take it that has brought us to the end of part one
Yep.
of the
Good.
pod.
Good place to stop. Appreciate everyone listening in, and we're going to talk WWE and NXT up next here. Catch you guys soon.
Oreo says bye.